The United States operates military bases in over 70 countries. Most are located in allied nations where the U.S. maintains close diplomatic ties. But one base stands apart, a major naval installation inside a country the U.S. government considers a state sponsor of terrorism. Inside the fence line, parts of Guantanamo Bay look like a quiet American suburb. There are suburban-style houses, schools, and McDonald's. Military personnel can even spend their time on a makeshift 9-hole golf course carved out of the dirt. Yet immediately adjacent to these residential areas are high-security detention camps designed to hold prisoners from across the globe. Cuba considers the American presence here illegal, and international organizations have long called for its closure. Despite this, the United States remains firmly in control of the territory. This base functions as a unique jurisdictional space. By maintaining a presence just outside its domestic borders, the U.S. government has a facility where standard legal frameworks can be set aside. The U.S. acquired this land at the end of the 19th century. After intervening to help Cuba gain independence from Spain, the United States refused to withdraw troops until Cuba signed a treaty for a naval station. The agreement specifies that the lease has no expiration date and can only be terminated if both countries agree. This provision allows the United States to occupy the territory indefinitely, regardless of whether the Cuban government wants them there. The relationship changed in 1959 when Fidel Castro took power. He established a communist regime and aligned Cuba with the Soviet Union, placing a major Cold War adversary directly at the base's border. In response, the border was heavily fortified. Cuban troops planted a 75-foot-wide barrier of thick cactus to isolate the facility, while roughly 55,000 landmines were placed in the strip of land separating the base from the rest of Cuba. When the Cuban government cut off the water supply, the U.S. responded by building desalination plants. Today, the base operates autonomously, generating its own power and fresh water, while remaining entirely cut off from the rest of the island. This period demonstrated that the U.S. could use the terms of a century-old lease to maintain a permanent presence on foreign soil, regardless of the host nation's opposition. By the 1990s, the base took on a new role. As thousands of refugees fled crises in Haiti and Cuba on makeshift rafts, the U.S. government faced a legal dilemma. If these migrants reached Florida, they'd gain the right to apply for asylum under domestic law. To prevent this from happening, the Coast Guard intercepted them at sea and brought them to Guantanamo Bay instead. The base quickly filled beyond its intended capacity. Over airfields and golf courses, the military constructed massive tent cities to house the growing population. Within these camps, some refugees were held in a distinct legal void. At Camp Bulkley, hundreds of Haitians who tested positive for HIV were quarantined. Even though many were cleared for asylum, a U.S. law prevented them from entering the country, leaving them trapped on the base for years without a clear path forward. The 1990s proved that Guantanamo could be used as an offshore facility to hold people in a location where domestic immigration laws and constitutional protections were not applied. After the attacks of September 11, the U.S. military began capturing suspected terrorists on the ground in Afghanistan. However, the government often lacked the specific evidence required to secure convictions in standard American courts. The military began shipping these suspects to Guantanamo. Because the base is not technically U.S. territory, the government argued the detainees could be held indefinitely without the right to a trial. To navigate international law, the administration classified the detainees as enemy combatants rather than prisoners of war. This specific label was used to remove the Geneva Convention protections that would otherwise govern their treatment. This led to the creation of high-security prisons like Camp Delta. In these facilities, prisoners were often kept in solitary confinement and restricted to small recreation pens with no opportunity to interact with others. The government eventually established Camp Justice, a makeshift complex of tents located on an old airfield, to conduct military tribunals. In these proceedings, the standard rules of evidence used in the U.S. are frequently set aside. During the War on Terror, the base became the primary tool for a strategy that used geography to operate outside both domestic and international legal oversight. The massive detention system built after 2001 has mostly been dismantled. Hundreds of prisoners have been transferred or released, leaving only 15 men currently held on the base. Maintaining this separate legal system is expensive. In a high-security federal prison in the U.S., it costs about $78,000 a year to hold an inmate. At Guantanamo, that cost rises to $29 million per prisoner per year. The base is the result of long-term policy decisions. It serves as a physical example of a strategy that prioritizes absolute control over the standard legal process. Guantanamo Bay shows that when a government creates a space to operate outside the law, it creates a permanent and costly trap that then eventually undermines the principle